most of you have met her already, but today we have Kate Hamberger with us, who wrote this book, Dances with Fire. When I took this position over from Amber, she suggested I look on the news to get ideas for speakers. And so I had the Central Oregon Daily app, and they had a feature on Kate, and I was fascinated by it and contacted her, and she does this sort of thing. And I would talk more about what the book says, but I'm not going to take it away from her. So I'm going to give you Kate.
Thank you. How many of you have fought forest fires? Is there anybody? All right. Yeah, okay.
Wow. I had 3 grandchildren that were all doing it while they were in college. And yeah, it's a great adventure.
That's cool. That's really cool. And I bet that there's at least one person in here who has said at one point or another, I should write that story down, or I should write a book. And I'm here to tell you that when I was a kid, I never imagined that one day I'd stand before a fire and watch flames run up a tall tree like a living creature, nor did I ever imagine that I would one day write a book. So I'm here to say you never know what your future is. Those things were made possible because I had some good teachers, I had strong community support, and I had, the power of education, right? Because the education helped me to navigate and gave me the tools I needed to face the wilderness, yes, but also the writing of my stories. So I want to just say, good teachers. I had good teachers who pushed me to go beyond my perceived capabilities. And I had community support that knew they knew about service, just like you guys do. And they knew about what it's like to lend a hand for somebody that needs some help. And I have a personal story with the Prineville Kiwanis because in high school, I was not a straight A student, and I was not a star athlete. And when I was a senior, it became apparent because I was the youngest of 6 kids. I realized that if I wanted to go to college, I was going to have to figure out a way to get there on my own. So I had teachers saying, you got to apply for as many scholarships as you think you're eligible for. So I did, and imagine my delight when right around graduation time I learned that I received 5 scholarships. One of them was from the Prineville Kiwanis Club, and those scholarships together enabled me to get to my freshman year at Oregon State. Now at OSU, probably all the colleges, I was required to take a PE class, and I was amazed at all my options. But because I love the outdoors, because I love being outside, one stood out to me, rowing on the Willamette River. That just sounded lovely to me, and it was as lovely as it sounded. And it turns out I was good at it. I tried out for the rowing team, and I made it into the varsity lightweight 8 boat. Has anybody read The Boys in the Boat and watched the movies? Okay, well, if there's one person in here who hasn't, I highly recommend it. But when I read that book, I was like, holy cow, it's true. All those things they say about how challenging rowing can be, it's true, and I was that boat was comprised mostly of freshmen and sophomore. We were a young, inexperienced team, so when we got through racing season, last race of the season was the regatta, they call it the Pac-10s, down in Sacramento on the American River. Our boat was lined up with a whole lot of other boats, and we were pretty intimidated. We weren't expected to get over 13th place, and we ended up with 3rd place. We were this far behind U of O, and of course University of Washington was ahead of us. My coach was so excited. He's like, you're coming back next year, right? And I said, I need a good paying summer job. Well, little did I know that he was friends with whoever it was that was hiring firefighters for the crews, the fire crews around Prineville. That's how I ended up on the Prineville hotshot crew, as an 18-year-old rookie. And at the time, I didn't realize how unusual that is. Like, they maybe hire one every season, hotshots. And I have to tell you that when I joined the hotshot crew, I was in peak physical fitness, right? Like, I don't think I could have been more fit. And I guarantee you 100% that if I hadn't been on the rowing team first, I would have washed out in 2 days. If you could Google, I don't know, I should try this, but if there was a list of physically challenging jobs, what are the top 10? I'm pretty sure that the hot shots would rank right up there. Just because, I don't know how many of you garden, but imagine using a hoe or a shovel or a pickaxe like all day and then all night and then hiking for miles. I mean, I look back at that time and think, how in the world did I do it? I don't know. I know that there were times that I would pray for strength, to get me through the next 10 minutes and then the next and the next. So prayer was a big part of my life as a firefighter, because it was hard. I was just telling Dave that, every time I was tempted to quit, I'd be out in the middle of wilderness and you're stuck. You can't quit. You have to keep going, right? Because nobody's going to come and get you out. So there I was. I kept going. First 2 years was with the Prineville Hotshots. And at the end of my second year, we were in Northern California, Humboldt County. Are you guys familiar with Humboldt County?
Oh, yeah.
The terrain is about as steep as you can get, and Humboldt County, of course, is known as, or it used to be known as, the illegal pot-growing capital of the country.
Still is.
Yeah, well, it's probably legal now, but that was a really rough fire, the Salmon Forks fire, because of that inversion layer that we were working under, thick, heavy smoke. A lot of people came down with respiratory infections, but I just remember the physical strain, the fatigue of being out there every day, from dawn till dusk. And I remember right before we left, we were at the end of September, and we were waiting to get shuttled out on the helicopters, and I was watching the helitack people, and I was sitting there going, man, they've got it made, they fly in the helicopters all the time, and there's not as much fire line to build. And so when I came back, I thought, I'm going to apply to be on the Prineville helitack crew and see if I can get on that crew. And so I did, and I was hired with the Prineville helicopter crew and just had a ball. Like, I remember on the 4th of July, I spent the day in the helicopter patrolling up and down the Deschutes River from Maupin all the way to the Columbia River, because there's so many whitewater rafters and a lot of fires start because of campfires left unattended. And so that's a happy memory that stands out. But just a day or two later, we got a strange call from, I want to say, I probably am not pronouncing it right, the Gallatin National Forest in Montana. And I'm like, why are they calling a little Jet Ranger 206 all the way in Montana? But we went. And by the time we got there, that fire had spilled down into Yellowstone National Park. They were experiencing the worst drought in decades, and an electrical storm had passed through. And I think they recorded something like 20,000, it was in the thousands, lightning strikes, starting fires. Now, the park policy understands how important fire is to forest ecosystems, and so their policy is let it burn, let it burn. But they wanted our helicopter for reconnaissance. So there we are. It was probably right around July 6th that we got there. And that fire, yes, most fires go out on their own, but there was something like, I don't know, 20 of them that did not. And those fires burned together, because we're talking about super dry lodgepole pine forests, you know, think of lapine. And so before we knew it, we had 7 big fires, so they call it the Yellowstone Fire Complex. How many of you remember that in Yellowstone? I think that was 1988. Yeah. So ours was the first helicopter, and they would later employ 70 helicopters at those fires. 26,000 firefighters, including the National Guard, came to fight that fire because there was no stopping it. There was no stopping the Yellowstone fires. Eventually it rained and snowed in higher elevations. In fact, I think it was September 11th when the rain started, and that began the ending of those fires. And I'll just say something political right now. I remember at the time, the news reports, like from the Washington Post and the New York Times, they created this story like there was going to be nothing left of Yellowstone National Park. And they almost fired the Park Service president, or you know, the top guy, because he had that let burn policy. And now, all these years later, they realized he was actually right. It did need to burn, and it burned in a mosaic pattern that was actually really healthy for the forest. So let that be a lesson to us about what you read in the newspaper, and you know, just the hysteria that they stirred up on that. At the end of my time, like I was there until I had to leave to register at Oregon State at the end of September. And so one of the last crews that I shuttled out before I left was a crew called the Horseshoe Meadows Hotshot Crew. And they were stationed between the Kings Canyon National Park and the Sequoia National Park up in Central California. The man that was the superintendent was an excellent storyteller, and he was telling me about all the adventures his crew had had, and he encouraged me to apply. It was going to be his last year, the following year. His name was Ben Charlie, and he was like a living legend. He started the crew in the 70s by recruiting Native American young men from the various tribes, and he got them into shape and got them trained so that they would qualify to be an official hotshot crew. So from that crew, I learned not only was it super challenging, because I think fighting fire in California is one of the hardest places that you can fight fire, but also there were mental and emotional challenges. You know, that's where I really showed some flaws that I had and some bad choices that I made. It's never a wise thing to have a crush on your married squad boss, right? But I share about that pretty honestly, just because I'm thinking, you know, if there's another 20-year-old who reads my book and happens to find herself or himself in a similar situation, maybe they can read how I handled it and think, I'm going to do that differently. Who knows? So from there, I went back to school. I had transferred to U of O, sorry. And
I knew someone would.
It's not where you start, it's where you finish.
Yeah, well, I came loaded with money, and I had the opportunity to do a semester of study in Spain. So there's 2 chapters in my book about my adventures in Spain. And then I knew I would need money to get a car because I was graduating from college. And so I had applied for 1 more year of firefighting, and I was hired by a crew out of Utah. And that crew, I ended up being the only woman on the crew. That was kind of scary. I wasn't sure I was going to make it with that one. That was also the summer that I experienced a wildfire, a firestorm coming right up at us, and I didn't think I was going to make it out of there. Like I was praying and like, Lord, don't let this hurt too bad. Let me die before it hits me, or, you know, just all, as you can imagine, I was terrified. And then I'm convinced even today that somehow the wind shifted just enough for us to get to the safety zone. So that's how my prologue opens up. It puts you right there. After that, I was trying to make a living. I was departing from fire, but in 1994, I had applied for one more year of fire back in Prineville, so I had come full circle. And that, of course, was the summer that I worked as an alternate for 2 weeks with the Prineville Hotshots, long enough to get to know each of them. And then my tour of duty was over. I went back to work with the engine crew, and they picked another alternate to go with them to Glenwood Springs, Colorado. So, you know, after that fatal summer, you read that slogan, "We will never forget." And I kept thinking, well, but how? Yes, they will. Yes, they will forget who these people are. And that's one reason that chapter 28 in here is kind of a tribute to those firefighters. And I tried to describe them in such a way that you could totally picture them so that they're really real. And
Because you were almost with them.
I was almost with them, yes. And so there's like 10 pages left after that where I talk about the effect that grief can have on you, and, you know, how I handled it, and also how life does move forward. And so one thing I wanted to say, one thing that we have learned is that, I'm kind of switching gears here, but I have a pamphlet here that talks about defensible space. Are you all familiar with that term, defensible space? You should be. Country where you should be. But if you have like a neighbor or something or a loved one who you know does not have defensible space, you know, it really does save lives, and it saves structures. Like if you go on Google and type in Tom Hanks, he spent extra money to make his home defensible. And so there's a picture that LA Times took of his mansion, and all around him the structures were burned, but his place wasn't, because he took, same with Steven Spielberg, they both spent the extra money and did the extra work to make their place defensible. And you think, you know, not only am I protecting my structure and my community, you can save a firefighter's life, and that's a big deal. By, you know, because the fire might get crazy and they run to your space, which is defensible, and that's how they can survive. So I had to really make that fast because it's 12:53. But are there any questions?
There's a memorial in Prineville that I've seen that's worth your while.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah. It's in the park, isn't it?
Yes,
Yep.
Ochoco Creek Park.
Yeah.
Scott Blackham.
Uh-huh.
His dad worked for me in Claskenine. And we put a memorial up to him as a result of his perishing in that fire. So it's something that's pretty close to some of our hearts.
Right. Anything else?
It's crazy hearing how many helicopters you guys had out there just for watching a fire. It's sure nice that we have drones now.
Yeah.
Putting
And
people in a flying machine that likes to go look at it when you can just put a camera in the air is sure a lot better.
And that's one thing I wanted to capture in my book. It was before smartphones. And so I could literally wake up in the morning and not know what state I'm in and not know what forest I am, having no idea really where I was, because we'd travel all night. And the thing about that dude fire is that we traveled from Las Vegas to that fire outside of Payson, and and I didn't sleep in the rig, so I was pretty tired as we got out of the rig at like 6 a.m. to start our work day. And I remember thinking, man, I hope this is an easy day. And it was one of the hardest days ever. So I agree, drones are a big addition, as well as having a cell phone that you can. I know that firefighters take them now, and when they get really homesick, because you get lonely for your family up there, and sometimes you don't see them all summer. Now they can call and when they have reception, so that's cool.
And Starlink.
Starlink, yeah.
Starlink Mobile, the little guy. You have one crew for one Starlink for 10 people. Everybody can use their phone like it anywhere they are and plug it in through USB-C to a little battery.
Yeah.
It's big changes.
Cool.
And I've heard people say we used to put out fires, now we just contain them. Would you?
What I'm hearing is that there's been decades of mismanagement, and they almost are wanting logging to come back just to create more defensible space.
Sure.
And so, they're wanting more. And I'll end with this. I know a fire guy. He wasn't a chief, but he was high up there working for LA County. And he saw all the fuels growing up around the homes. He ended up leaving LA County because he knew what happened in January was going to happen, and he had zero resources to prevent it. And he's like, I can't be here to see this when it happens. So he left. And, it is heartbreaking, but keeping fuels down through burning is one of the best ways to fight the mega fires. So thank you guys for.
Yeah. Picture.
Oh, maybe be right here too. So we can
I forgot.
And for you,
We'll send you up there.
made out of wood.
I like it.
Okay. And we're both supposed to smile.
It's got a fire retardant on the outside.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Run off on fire.
What did you say?
So I'm going to see it.